What if Anakin Skywalker was trained by the Force? Let's start this story a couple of years after The Phantom Menace. In the 2016 Obi-Wan Kenobi comics, Anakin admits to Obi-Wan that he wishes to leave the Jedi Order as he feels his path in the Force lies elsewhere. In the comics, he changes his mind and decides to stay in the Jedi Order. However, in this story, we're going to have Anakin stick to his original beliefs and leave the Jedi Order and Obi-Wan behind. Firstly, he would go back home to Tatooine to spend some time with his mother Shmi. He thought a lot about her in the last couple of years and has been longing to see her. He was delighted to see she was no longer a slave and has been freed by Qui-Gon and lives with her new husband on their moisture farm. Anakin stays with them for a while and enjoys their time together and feels like this is the family he's never had. Seeing his mother happy and smiling brings him an immeasurable amount of joy. But as time passes, he feels unfulfilled and a bit guilty. He heard all about the Chosen One prophecy and how he supposedly has the power to bring balance to the Force and defeat the Sith, the League of Force users who seek to control the galaxy for their own personal gain. But sitting here on Tatooine, doing nothing with all his potential seems wrong. He decides to leave Tatooine for the time being and explore his potential in the Force. He's read all about the first Jedi Temple in the archives and traveled to Tython, as well as its moons Ashla and Bogan, the representatives of the light and dark. He travels all around the early Jedi settlements and realizes how different this was from the temple on Coruscant. These temples were more attuned with the Force and each had their own purpose, to learn and master different elements of the Force. This was different to current day, and Anakin wondered how much the Jedi have changed since their conception. Anakin journeyed deep into the old Jedi headquarters and begins reading some of the old Jedi scrolls. He spends days here, learning new and forgotten knowledge, and time doesn't feel like it's passing. He gets consumed in one scroll until he sees a light begin to flicker across the room. Anakin thinks he's dreaming and wonders if he's even awake, but the light gets closer and closer until it takes the form of his old master, Qui-Gon Jinn. He's ecstatic to see the old master, but wonders how this is possible. Is he still alive? But Qui-Gon tells Anakin he isn't, but he's managed to preserve his consciousness after death and has come to guide Anakin to his next destination in his journey to discovering his purpose in the Force. He takes Anakin back to his ship, who asks the master where he's meant to go, who tells him to trust in the Force and he will make it to his destination. He arrives outside a nebula, a collection of dead stardust that's blocking his scanners, but through the Force, he senses a planet is hidden deep within. He trusts Qui-Gon and the Force and ventures into the nebula. He loses control over the ship and understands that the Force is guiding his journey. He breaks through the initial layer as the planet emerges in the center, and he instantly feels the rush of the Force flow through him like nothing he's ever felt before. This place is a nexus of Force energy. Could it be the origins of Force energy itself? His ship lands and he exits, taking in his surroundings, feeling the energy and life flow inside of him. He leaves the ship and begins walking away and uses the Force to guide him to where he needs to go. He reaches an earthy terrain with various different growths of plants and floating rocks all around him. He begins to hear voices.
"You're late, cousins. I have a guest."
Anakin calls out to the voices, asking them to reveal themselves. The light appears in front of him again, and it grows in intensity, and out come 5 beings created purely by the Force, who call themselves the Force Priestesses. They tell Anakin they've been waiting for him, and it's time to begin his training, that the Force itself guided him to them. Anakin follows them, unsure of what will await him, but feels like this is what he's been looking for. The Priestesses take Anakin to a secluded chamber, where they circle around him, each with a different look on their faces. The Priestesses who led him there tells Anakin he was conceived by the Force itself for one purpose, to save the galaxy from an immeasurable evil and restore balance. They tell Anakin they have watched his journey and have witnessed the passion that fuels his spirit, but these emotions must be tempered and channeled, and if left unchecked, can lead to the path of darkness. They ask Anakin if he's up to the task. His training will be grueling, intense, and long, but in the end, rewarding. Anakin stands there, determined, and states he is ready, and so his training begins. For the next couple of years, Anakin undergoes intense training by the Priestesses. Each priestess represents a different emotion: serenity, joy, anger, confusion, and sadness, and taught Anakin different aspects of the Force. He learned how to use the Force in ways he never thought possible, learning techniques only Jedi could dream of. He's learned to cultivate lands, to fly, and to touch lightsabers. They helped him to harness his ability to peer into the future, allowing him to use this ability on command, but it had its limitations and consumed a lot of Force energy. However, the core of their teachings transcended mere physical powers. They taught Anakin to master the balance between serenity and passion, causing Anakin to find tranquility, guiding him through the meditative practices. They used the Force to put Anakin into many intense scenarios, with the death of his mother, relive Qui-Gon's fate, but also the Sith attacking him, and through these experiences, it taught him to quell the storm of emotions that occurred within. He could feel, mourn, and experience every emotion, but didn't let it consume him and change who he really was. Anakin achieved balance in his emotions, which helped him view the galaxy with a logical edge. He explored the depths of empathy, understanding the interconnectedness of all living things. They also warned him against the allure of darkness and how important it was to control the darkness within oneself, as to ignore it would only give it power. He learned to embrace the emotions that were a part of him, but didn't let them rule him. During these years, Anakin went to visit his mother often. The Priestesses were not as dogmatic as the Jedi and allowed Anakin to have attachments, but only after he'd learned to not let his emotions consume him. Shmi was extremely proud of what Anakin was doing and what he had achieved and what he plans for the galaxy. They also taught Anakin about the Jedi and Sith and stated that the Force does not discriminate between the Jedi and Sith, between good and evil. It exists beyond such divisions. It's the choices one makes that shapes their destiny. There is only one Force. During this time, Palpatine searches extensively for Anakin, the boy whom he wanted to become his future apprentice and aid in the destruction of the Jedi Order. But his search was futile, and Anakin was far from his reach. After 5 years of training, when Anakin reached 18 years old, his training is almost complete. His power in the Force is far superior to what it was in the original timeline, and could even defeat the Father in combat. The Priestesses just taught Anakin the power of projecting his consciousness, a technique called flow walking, and can now view what's happening across the galaxy, and if he wants, can project his body there as well, similar to what Luke did in The Last Jedi. But Anakin can do it for longer, and more effortlessly. He watches Obi-Wan, his old master, who cared for Anakin deeply, and Anakin probably wouldn't have gotten to this point without him. He sees him with a new Padawan, a young male Ithorian, and teaches him the same lessons he taught Anakin. He thinks about revealing himself to Obi-Wan so that he can talk to him, but refrains himself from doing so. There would be no point to it, and he needs to wait until the time is right. But someone else that he watches a lot is Padme Amidala. He hasn't forgotten her since they first met on Tatooine all those years ago, and her beauty has remained, and she's as eloquent as ever. He feels a deep love for her and desperately wants to visit her, ask her how she's been, and explain the deep impact she's had on his life. But one day, when Anakin is watching Padme through the Force, arriving on Coruscant, he reaches out with the Force and senses something is wrong. He peers into the future and sees the ship she's on explode, and he moves instantly. He projects himself into Coruscant and uses the Force to pull everyone off the ship and onto the landing pad safely as the ship explodes in the air above. He puts them all down and realizes he can't sense Padme here, but he looks to his left to see her arrive out of another ship and rush towards them. She stops midway and stares at Anakin, calling out his name. Anakin realizes what he's done and breaks the connection, and to Padme, his body dissipated into nothingness. Padme was beyond confused at what had happened. She hadn't seen Anakin in around 10 years. The next day, when Obi-Wan is assigned to her protection, she asks him about Anakin, as she hasn't seen him since they last met. But Obi-Wan tells Padme Anakin left the Jedi Order 6 years ago, and that he hasn't seen him since. Padme tells Obi-Wan she saw him yesterday on Coruscant, but then he disappeared into nothingness. Obi-Wan asks Padme if she's sure, who states she was positive. Obi-Wan thinks about this deeply. He's always thought about Anakin and wondered what he's been up to. He assumed he'd be with his mother on Tatooine, but never considered the possibility. He continued his Force training. He doesn't think it's best if he focuses too much on this, but Padme on the other hand couldn't. Anakin had come to save her, and showed that he really cared about her after all these years, and thinks that Anakin might be watching over her. That night, Padme can't sleep and sits up in her bed. She's wondering whether Anakin is watching over her in this very moment. After yesterday's assassination attempts, she calls out to him and mutters his name under her breath. Anakin was watching over her and is taken aback when he hears this, but his feelings for Padme overcome his logic and he reveals himself to the senator. She gasps when she sees him and asks how he can do this. He explains how he's become powerful in the Force, training with the Force itself to ultimately bring balance to the galaxy. Padme is stunned by this and can tell by Anakin's presence that he possesses immense power. She asks Anakin if his job is to bring balance to the Force, then why would he be watching over her all this time? Anakin looks away for a second, but then reverts his eyes back to Padme and tells her he's loved her ever since they met at that horrible junk shop on Tatooine, and has thought about her ever since. He sits down next to Padme on the bed, holding his gaze, and locks lips with the senator, whose heart skips a beat. Padme tells Anakin she feels the same way, and they spend some time together. Padme eventually falls asleep, and Anakin heads back to the wellspring of life. But as his consciousness returns back to his body, he turns around to see the 5 Force Priestesses watch over him. They barrage Anakin for what he's done, interfering with the natural flow of events and following his own selfish desires. But Anakin tells them he's been training for this, and his love for Padme only refines his resolve and determination, and that they've seen in his training that his attachment and bond with her will not affect his duty. He won't let the associated emotions consume him, and states that he wants to be with her. The priestesses tell Anakin that Padme has a pivotal role to play not only in the beginning of the war, but also during. And during this, she will be put in multiple situations where her life will be in danger and potentially end. They will allow Anakin to pursue his desires and be with Padme, as long as he never interferes with the natural events of the galaxy. Whenever her life is in danger, no matter how extreme, and if she's on the brink of death, he may not intervene, as this may disrupt the fabric of time itself and change the course of the galaxy. Anakin agrees to this. He knows his duty to bring balance to the Force must override his personal feelings, and he's been training exactly for this. The Clone War begins, and the galaxy is thrust into chaos. The priestesses explain why they're allowing the war, as its purpose is to show the worlds of the Republic and Separatists that change is needed to the galaxy, but also to show the Jedi Order how their philosophy of the light side of the Force is wrong. Anakin watches the war as it unfolds. 3 long brutal years, and its horrors exceeded what Anakin imagined. He spent a lot of his time continuing his training, but also spending his time with Padme. He wished he could be there physically, but projecting himself to Coruscant would have to suffice for now. The priestesses were right. Padme was put in danger multiple times, and Anakin feared for her life, but he stayed true to his promise and never interfered, no matter how dire the situation looked. It was 3 years into the war, and the priestesses approached Anakin one day. However, this time it was different. The 5 priestesses approach Anakin and combine into one, and then transform into a humanoid-shaped being, made only of light. Anakin asks what the meaning of this is, and the being tells Anakin that he's sorry for the deception all these years, that he's been waiting until he's ready to reveal himself, that he's actually the Force itself, and created the illusion of the Force priestesses to teach him all these years, but it's been him all along. He tells Anakin the truth, that he created him 21 years ago, as a child of the Force, to carry out his will and vision onto the galaxy, that he couldn't do it himself, and that Anakin hasn't let him down. But now the time is right to cleanse the galaxy of the dark side, and transform the Jedi into the true peacekeepers of the galaxy. He tells Anakin the truth behind the Sith, that Palpatine is the Sith Lord behind the Clone War, and that Anakin will face him. But the Force doesn't want his son to kill the Sith and stain his hands with blood, so he teaches Anakin one last power, the power to cleanse a user of the Force and remove their connection to the midichlorians. Anakin sets off on his journey, and he goes to the Jedi Council first. He bursts in during a council meeting, and every master in the room can feel the power he possesses. Yoda sits up and asks him who he is, and Anakin tells him the truth. He is Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, returning to the galaxy and here to bring balance to the Force. Anakin and Obi-Wan lock eyes together, and his old master smiles at him, and they communicate everything they need to each other with their eyes. Obi-Wan seeing Anakin in front of him with this extreme level of power brings him some clarity. He always felt guilty for letting Anakin leave the Order and not following behind him, but now he knows Anakin leaving the Order was a part of his journey and ultimately the will of the Force. All the Masters can sense his power and know he must be telling the truth. Anakin reveals the secret about the Sith behind the Clone War and that he has come to defeat them, but that he'll require their assistance in controlling the Senate during the war. The Council agrees, and he gives them the proof they need, footage of Palpatine and Dooku together, as well as countless chat logs between them, and also reveals the Kaminoans' involvement with bank and communication records between them and Dooku. He tells them to present this to the Republic Security Council and get them to execute Order 65 before it's too late. He next goes to the industrial region on Coruscant, where he finds Palpatine with Dooku. He enters and reaches out with the Force to show them his strength, and Sidious shrieks in panic as he and Dooku ignite their lightsabers to attack Anakin. He pulls back and rises in the air and casts electrical judgment down on them. They manage to block, but Anakin rushes at them with his insane speed and kicks Dooku down. Palpatine swipes at Anakin, but he grabs the blade with his bare hand and tosses it across the room. He pulls Dooku over with the Force and holds them both by the side of their heads, flowing his Force energy into them and severing their connections to the midichlorians, and now they can no longer use the Force. He steps back as Palpatine goes to cast lightning at him, but he stares down at his hands as the technique fails, and he slowly realizes what Anakin has done. Anakin brings them back to the Jedi Council, and they're arrested and tried in front of the Senate for their crimes against the Republic and sentenced to life in prison. However, Anakin wasn't finished. A couple of days after this, he meets back up with the Jedi Council, who thank Anakin for what he's done for the galaxy. But Anakin tells the Jedi the truth, that Dooku was right. The Jedi's own arrogance and self-righteousness led to the Clone War. The Jedi's dogmatic ways of no attachments and blind obedience to the Senate allowed the Sith to rise in the first place. The Jedi strayed too far away from what they once were, peacekeepers who served the good of the Republic, to the minions of the Senate. He transforms the Council chambers to show them images of the past. He shows them the Jedi 1,000 years ago, fighting against the Brotherhood of Darkness, led by Lord Khan, and shows a Jedi crying as his master, General Hoth, leaves to face the darkness of the Sith. He mourned his master and sincerely missed him, and these emotions are normal and human, not something that can be shut out. The Jedi of old harnessed these emotions, but didn't let it consume them. He goes back even further to show the Jedi thousands of years ago, traveling from system to system, helping out villages, towns, cultivating lands, ending disputes between species, and ultimately spreading prosperity, making sure everyone wins and is happy in the end. And they all had families and attachments, whilst protecting themselves from the allure of the dark side. The Jedi of the current era don't exhibit this, and simply do what they're told by the Senate, who don't serve the people of the Republic it represents. They must change their ways to represent the Jedi of old, or history will repeat itself. The Sith will rise again, and use the chaos in the galaxy to take control. They must step away from the Senate, and begin serving the people of the Republic. Yoda stands, and thanks Anakin for showing them how the path they've taken for 1,000 years has had a negative impact on the galaxy, and that they will change their ways, and offers for Anakin to become the Grand Master of the Order and lead them down this path. But Anakin refuses and shakes his head, but tells them this must be something they do themselves, but he will assist them if they stray too far from the correct path. He leaves them and consents they will make real change, and the Council spends days writing up the new manifesto of the Jedi Order. Anakin heads to Padme, who can tell it's Anakin in the flesh this time, and not just a projection. She tells him how proud she is of him for ending the war and bringing balance back to the galaxy. But Anakin tells her his job is finished and they can finally live their life together, the one they talked and dreamed about extensively. Padme decides to leave the Senate, and she knows it will thrive in the hands of Chancellor Mothma and Co-Chancellor Organa, as well as the Jedi Order, helping to rebuild the galaxy following the war. Anakin had fulfilled his role as the Chosen One, trained by the Force itself to restore the galaxy back to balance, and ended with the life he's always wanted. Only weeks later, Padme became pregnant with their first child, and 9 months later, at the birth, Anakin looks out the window to see a bright light in the humanoid shape, the Force itself, his father, look upon Anakin, happy that he completed the role he was destined to. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch What If Anakin Skywalker Never Turned to the Dark Side animation, or What If Qui-Gon Never Found Anakin. A big thanks to Gerardo for requesting this idea. He's been following the channel since we had 50 subscribers, and your support is greatly appreciated. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Please comment below your new ideas, and may the Force be with you.